directly at the time. Specifically, the email was from a sergeant, and it read, "Weird, another minority." While the inappropriate email was addressed right away by the assistant chief who received it, formal written corrective action did not occur till a while later. Once I was made aware, I directed that written corrective action be taken. Lastly, I need to discuss a matter of an allegation that was raised by a union attorney against me. This allegation was that somewhere in January 2021, I was extolling the virtues of fascism. This was used as part of the defense in the process for Derek Camerzell. Okay? I want to be crystal clear that in no time have I ever promoted fascism. I was reported to state something to the effect of maybe the fascists had it right. This was allegedly to have occurred, like I said, back in January 2021. Again, I've never supported fascism. I don't recall saying what was alleged. I do, however, wonder if this statement was related to a conversation I was having where I was having a significant challenge in hiring new officers. We were discussing how most of society, that term, the Great Resignation, had come about because most of our country was having a problem with hiring and specifically law enforcement. I do recall stating that it was confusing to me that in a free society we're struggling to get people to take good paying jobs, but historically fascist regimes were highly effective at getting people to do despicable things through fear. It was an observation of contrasting influence, not an endorsement or support, with fear being a powerful influence even in terms of making people do things they would not normally do. Again, in any way, this is in no way, shape, or form a statement of my support for fascism. Honestly, the entire thing was pretty much a pathetic attempt to somehow normalize the actions of someone else by, throwing shade on me. As noted prior, we've already completed a substantial amount of training on race and equity inclusion, so what are we doing about it? Our latest training sessions have been well received by the officers, and the evaluations of the training, specifically Dwayne Bryan's training, indicated that our officers are embracing the opportunity to learn and grow in this area and want more training. Okay, so progress is still continuing forward. We will continue to put this and other types of training out in 2022 with an obvious focus on sensitivity and awareness of anti-Semitism. We are reviewing our investigation disciplinary processes and looking to elevate in that area. We're looking to update our code of conduct policy, which is outdated. We follow the traditional, historical, generalized civility and respect guidelines that most of our organizations have had for a long time. And we have an opportunity to be more specific in addressing racism and those issues in our policy, and we're looking to do that. And we have asked for the assistance of our race and equity manager, Yurio Varela, and he's coming in to meet with us and go through what we have and give us some guidance on what we need to improve in that regard. Very eager to hear what he has to say. On these issues, I do also want to state that terminating employees for egregious misconduct is something we all agree on and must happen. In circumstances where there isn't misconduct that rises to that level, however, our process is to address the issue, hold the employee accountable, take corrective action, and give the employee a chance to improve. Our goal, with like many organizations, is to develop our people and allow them the opportunity to redeem themselves when appropriate. And that's what's happening with us here. So I'll pause there for questions on these.
Councilor Malamer.
Thank you. Thank you for the transparency, Chief. I guess, my comment is I'm just a little concerned. I mean, we're almost 2 years past the Floyd uprising, and when a lot of this came to the surface, and I know many of us were pushing at that point for changes in our policy. I guess I'm just a little stunned that something like violence is golden could be part of our training curriculum, and it's taken us this long to look closely at our training curriculum and find that. I just, and we all on the council here, we got the letter from the KPOA executive board that made similar statements about the use of violence and force. So I don't think that's anything new. And can you tell us, exactly what you are doing to vet out this mentality in our training?
So, as I mentioned, we went through all of the listed reading to make sure and double check that wasn't an issue. The article in question had been in there, we think at least 4 years, and no one currently was really actively aware in the command staff that it was something we had. So it's one of those things where we do have, probably thousands of pages of training documents that have to go through, and we think that the vast majority aren't an issue, but we continue to be vigilant to ensure that, right? What I can say is that the moment this was brought to our attention, we addressed it immediately. The concerns you talk about from KPOA, they're embracing this deal was back in 2020. And so although Floyd was 2 years ago and we're very, very aware of that, the incidents we're talking about are being surfaced now as if they're new, and they're not. They were dealt with in the past. We're bringing them up now because obviously we're aware that they're going to be put out publicly. And so rather than have that appear to be something that's happening right now, we're addressing it to show that it was dealt with a year ago.
You good?
For now.
Hey, Councilmember Michelle?
Thank you, Council President. Chief, I have a couple of questions. My first one is, can you very briefly tell us what kind of upcoming equity training we have for the officers?
Well, we are switching gears in light of recent unfortunate events, and we are researching the opportunity. There's a state course through Criminal Justice Training Center on anti-Semitism and awareness and sensitivity. I'm in touch. I have a meeting actually next week with the American Jewish Committee. They are very interested in bringing in a group of rabbis and Jewish leaders to sit down specifically with our command staff and talk about the awareness of those issues, what they see as our role to be as the gatekeepers to prevent that kind of activity being any part of our culture and operations. And then I know the mayor has been in touch with the Jewish Federation of Greater Seattle, and we haven't honed in on exactly what there is, but I'm aware of a national training that has been put out that they are probably wanting to talk to us about, and we'll look at developing that. Outside of that, we are also completing some of the state mandatory training in this regard. That's ongoing, including what's called patrol procedures tactics will take up the bulk of our training hours that are what we call block training. It's 24 hours of required training that goes through everything, including de-escalation, cultural sensitivity and awareness, that kind of thing. So in addition to, we just completed ABLE, which is active bystandership for law enforcement, in terms of duty to intervene. This is a Georgetown Law National Certified Program. We're one of a few state departments in the state now that have completed this certification. And it's all about intervening before misconduct occurs, reporting it appropriately when it does occur, and developing a culture of accountability. So we've done that. And more to come. Some probably stuff I'm not even thinking of off the top of my head.
Okay. Hey, Chief, I just want to add today, thanks a lot. Appreciate the thoughts we just put out there. So we have the Jewish coming, and that's really based on what happened with Camazel, right? So they're focusing on that, right? There's a lot of groups out there, right? Excuse me. Is there one training or a particular training we can get out there that kind of covers everything? And I'm hoping, like most of us who are in profession, we go through certain training, sign a code of conduct every year. I just signed mine today, right? So have you thought about having some of these in place on a yearly basis?
Yes, we have. I see it being, in addition to the training that's put together by the city as well, right? So that's going to be an additional layer. Right now, understandably, I think you'd agree that we had to pivot to focus on the specific issues related to the Jewish community,
Right.
But we'll keep going in the general sense. I think, as I try to look at where we're at, the bottom line is that we continue to evolve, and we need to evolve in the way we communicate and interact, and make sure it's top to bottom.
Okay. Thank you. Councilman Lumber?
Yeah, so, we talk a lot about training, but I'm curious about just officer mental health and what do we do about, let's be honest, our officers see the worst in humanity, and they see it generally every day in their job. They see some really great, wonderful things too, but they face things that we most of us never will continually. How are we addressing mental health? Because I think there's definitely a mental health component here. When you live, seeing these incidents continually. So how does that, I feel like we can give them all the training we want, but are we giving the proper mental health supports throughout the year as well?
To the degree we can, because it's a medical condition, we do have some limits. We are doing some pretty innovative things in that regard. I'll go through those briefly, but I do want to say that there is probably, we have competing interests, right? We have the ever-growing difficulty of the job, the violence that's more prevalent now than it has been ever, and then the crisis with our staffing. So on one hand, operationally, the weight of the job and the impact of the job is being felt more severely by each individual officer because they're carrying a heavy load than they have ever before. Okay, we're back down to like 1990 staffing levels right now. Okay, so that's on one side. The environment is creating additional stress into what they normally see. What we're doing on the other side is that we do have a strong peer support and chaplaincy program. We've had that forever. We've gone through the lengths of working to bring in mental health professionals and just having scheduled open appointments. That's something we've started again, to where we're trying to normalize the idea of that everyone probably should have someone professionally to talk to, regardless if they think so or not. And we try to really remove the stigma to that. We have a wellness team led by Sergeant Tung. We've invested quite a bit there in terms of, we get updates from him, we've got readings from him, videos, recommendations. We're following that. We work closely with HR and Chris Hills in our risk management. He is on top of these issues, and we ever have any indication that one of our employees is in crisis, this city has invested very much in making sure we get the proper resources and treatment to our officers. I obviously can't go into medical procedures, but I will say that it's been substantial. All of that, we still need to do more. We hope to break ground on that long-awaited training room that we have, because I want to have the ability to put wellness in as part of the duty hours of our employees if we can. So we should, to inoculate and to help build resiliency in our officers, it should be a scheduled part of their work week, that they have dedicated time to work on wellness issues. And once we have that training room, it's going to go a long ways to do that. So it's a long roundabout answer. All of that said, council member, I wish we could do a lot more, and we're always looking for opportunities.
And this may not be something you can answer. It may fall into the HR realm, but I'm just curious, like, in trying to normalize wellness and mental health well-being, what can we require? I mean, it's one thing to make it open hours, but we know that there's, attitudes and peer pressure, and, in an attempt to normalize it, it almost seems to me like it needs to be somewhat mandated.
Yeah, we're kind of stepping into an HR realm. I'm looking over there. But in essence, there has to be a cause to look towards mandatory items such as fit for duty evaluations, things of those natures. I will say that when we had concern in that regard, we have sought those appointments, and I will say, to my knowledge, 100% of them were met without resistance, and the employee willingly participated to make sure that they were right to do the job. A standard practice of ours is, after officer-involved shootings, every one of our officers is put on administrative leave for a 2-week cycle for recovery at minimum. During that time, we schedule them for an evaluation assessment, and we get confirmation from a professional that the person is at least well or psychologically fit to return to duty.
But we're not able to say, like, our entire staff is, once a year you're going to be evaluated or have.
I don't believe I have the authority, and I'm looking over at the city attorney who's shaking his head saying no.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Michelle, you still got your line?
Yes,
Please.
thank you, Council President. Okay, talking about culture, we've heard a lot about the culture. And so I'm just wondering if you or your assistant chiefs attend training with the officers to kind of get a feel of how it's going. I know we have the surveys, but it's kind of different if you are there in person and can see what's going on.
Correct. Generally speaking, all of our command, top to bottom, which is a very heavy lift and actually not very common in law enforcement realms, we attend all the training with the officers. This last round of training that we had with Dwayne Bryant, we had a separate session for command and with council and our community. So this is one of the instances where we didn't attend with the officers because we had a separate longer session, but generally we do.
I have another question. Is there a way for officers to anonymously report issues or complaints or?
Yes, like we receive it, they could, and they would report it how we would we would take it as any other complaint we would get. How they would do that specifically, I'd have to think about that. But if someone reported something to us and requested to be anonymous, the reality is that if it became a formal investigation, at some point, their name would be known. It's a public disclosure thing. It's something we can't control by law. So
For
they
example,
can be anonymous at the start, but if we do an investigation because it's needed, it's difficult for them to remain anonymous.
For example, the Seattle Police Department, their OPA, you can go online and file a complaint, and it can be anonymous.
Oh, yes, so you can file an anonymous complaint on our online or mail or what have you, and we will look into it.
How would someone do that, though?
Right now, they can go on our website, and we're in the process of re-establishing a newer look to our website. That's coming. Go in there, click on the community citizen contact form, and just type the information.
And you don't have to have a name or contact info or
You
anything?
can leave it anonymous. I don't know if there's a tracking system because of the email process. I would have to look into that.
Okay.
Councilmember Pincher?
Thank you. So Chief, on follow-up on both the last two questions. One, I appreciate that there is follow-up and people talk to someone after a shooting. But on a day-by-day and week-by-week basis, the officers are seeing things, and the cumulative effect of what they see affects them, could be positively, could be negatively. So just to tag on to what where Councilmember Larimer might have been going, we've talked about mental health. If there is something that would call the officers, because I realize some still follow the old, you're not strong if you have to talk to someone, the old outdated thinking, but to have them be able to speak to someone, to know that they're okay in a confidential method, in a confidential way, and that their job would still be safe. I think that's important, just on things that they see, whether it's the DV calls, just the things that they see in the daily shift of their work. And then on the, from Councilmember Michaud, can you tell me a little bit of, because one thought I had is for anybody who does make the complaint, how are they protected against retribution? I realize that things, I'm sure that they would be protected from overt or from something that would be definite, saying or doing something that is easily pointed out. But what about some of the more obscure ways, things that could happen, whether it be duty assignments or whatever? How do you control or watch out for that to make sure that whoever does report is also protected?
Well, thank you for that. We have had, I do want to start by saying that the vast majority of incidents are reported by coworkers and current staff in the rank and file. So we do have what I think is a consistent culture of people reporting and doing the right thing by stepping up and addressing an issue so we can look at it. So there's that. In terms of retribution, I hear what you're saying in terms of it. There are some areas where it's difficult to measure whether or not someone's, taking retribution in a non-direct way. But I will say that what we use to guard against that is that we ensure that our processes, for promotions, specialty positions, considerations of different assignments and advancement are all followed, most of which are governed by civil service, and the ones not governed by civil service are governed by policy. And we follow those, and if there's an exception to that or we go outside of that, that's my job to look at it and make sure it's not occurring. And so the challenge is always making sure we're sticking to the right protocols that we should be following so that there's always an equitable process for anybody, regardless of they've made a complaint or, you know, something to that matter. So we're always looking for it. So there's not a more formalized way than to be on guard and pay attention to it. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Councilmember Lumber.
Me again. So Chief, I know that, you know, we've had conversations in the past and, you know, I feel pretty confident that we do go out of our way during the hiring process to do background checks and sort of vet to avoid these extremist attitudes. But what are we doing to monitor that beyond hire? I mean, you know, if we can screen for it then, but then 10 years into their career, 15 years into the career, like how is it today, or how could we have an ongoing system for this?
Well, so I think there's a lot of attention now on it that hasn't existed prior. And so if you look at some of the current laws, particularly the ones that were passed last year, that issue is front and center for the Criminal Justice Training Commission. And they are in the process of kind of developing how that's going to be meted out and the mechanisms and the systems that we're going to have to look at internally. So my answer to you is that's being worked on because it's not something we've had to not something we've had to focus on as much as we have now. Just because I think there's a lot of more awareness on it now than there ever was. And so those systems, I assure you, are coming through the states, and we will be in compliance with them.
Okay, great. And then I just think, you know, a final, I think, ask of you and an agenda ask is, like, I would like to see, you know, an update on that point.
On the
Months on
I'm sorry.
yeah, I would like to have you come back and give us an update, you know, as those requirements evolve, and, you know, to understand what we are doing as a department in that arena of monitoring for extremism.
Okay.
As well as, is it possible, I know I would personally like to just see, like, what is sort of I don't know that I've ever seen a training breakdown of what, you know, what they go through upon hire, and then, you know, what they repeat every year.
Okay.
I would just love to see that just broken down in writing.
Let me make a quick note.
Thank you. And then with that, I'm done, I promise.
That's okay. It's all good.
Council President, I was going to follow up with one last item. We've had questions about 8 They Can't Wait. I know I've exceeded
what?
The police reform initiative, 8 They Can't Wait.
Yep.
We've had some recent questions about where we're at on that.
Yep.
I will say very succinctly, we are in full compliance and beyond. Most of the items in there are now state law. But if you'd like a more in-depth presentation on that, I can do it at a later, maybe the next public safety, operations public safety committee meeting. I can come back for
I
that.
think it'd be great to do that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
And we can use the time that we've
Yep.
already overused.
Yeah. Are you clear on what Councilmember Lammer is seeking?
I do believe. If not, I will ask questions later.
Okay.
Get together.
Okay. Any other question for the chief? Yes, Derek. You have a question for the chief too?
I'll think on my feet. No, the word transparency has come up a few times this afternoon. And so in the spirit of transparency, I want to make sure the council is aware that I've learned of a technical glitch with our live broadcast to Facebook and YouTube that caused at least a portion of the chief's remarks not to be broadcast live. It has been fixed, and I've been assured by our multimedia team that we'll be able to put out a complete recording of this meeting through both Facebook and YouTube going forward. So our apologies to the committee and to the public for any of those missing minutes, but we'll be able to correct that.
So will you be able to put it is it recorded and then you put it out there, or how will you do that, do you know?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how
Okay.
it works technically, but we'll make sure that what's posted on YouTube is the complete broadcast.
Okay.
And then on Facebook, I don't know if it's a new post or an edit to the existing post, but either way, it will be the complete recording.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good job. All righty. Anything else for the chief? Okay,
thank
anything else? Are you good with us?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. All righty. We're a little behind schedule, but that's okay. We'll get caught up here. So we're going to move on to. No, we don't have to adjourn. Can we move on?
Yeah.
All right.
We need to switch the technology.
All right. So we're going to adjourn our Operation Public Safety Committee meeting for 5 minutes. Okay?
Thank you, Ted.